Laura Eliza Jane Seymour Bell was born in 1829 in Glenavenny in Northern Ireland to Captain R. H. Bell. Her mother was the illegitimate daughter of Lord Hertford, the third Marquess of Hertford. Little is known of her childhood, but the family eventually moved to Belfast. There she worked as a shop assistant, but the pay was pitiful, and being a very attractive girl with cascades of long golden hair, large blue eyes and a fresh peaches and cream complexion, who was also very intelligent, she tried to think of ways to boost her meagre income. She soon found a more lucrative living as a courtesan, and her affairs with wealthy men made her notorious. She also tried her hand at acting during this early period of her life, but was ultimately unsuccessful. She decided a move to Dublin would help her move in better circles, and was frequently spotted riding around in her own carriage in the tree-lined avenues of Phoenix Park. It was also while she lived in Dublin that she reportedly had a relationship with Dr. William Wilde, father of Oscar Wilde. He owned St. Mark's Ophthalmic Hospital for diseases of the eye and ear in Dublin. It wouldn't be the first time that the good doctor would be involved in scandals involving women. In 1849, Laura moved to London, where her first job was at Jay's General Mourning House in Regent Street. This establishment sold all types of goods needed for elaborate Victorian-era funerals. Perhaps she thought of the wealthy widowers who would need some understanding companionship during their lonely evening hours. Soon, though, Laura had moved on again, and she quickly established herself as a leading London courtesan. Her prominence on the scene soon attracted attention, and before long she had earned the title of the Queen of London Whoredom. She was given this title because of her wealthy clientele of noblemen and dukes. Her success as a courtesan was partly due to outclassing her rivals in looks, but also her intelligence meant she could entertain her upper-class clients with witty talk and discourse with them about topical subjects. She became quite the celebrity, so much so that on one occasion at the opera, the entire house rose simultaneously to look at her as she was leaving. In addition, as she had done in Dublin, she was often seen riding in her carriage, but this time it was in Hyde Park, in a gilt one drawn by two magnificent white horses. The British Foreign Office was very keen on establishing Nepal as a buffer state between India and Russia, and Jung Bahadur became the first prince from the South Asian subcontinent to be invited to the court of Queen Victoria. One day while hobnobbing in Hyde Park, the Nepalese prince laid eyes on Laura Bell. He was completely smitten, and she was allegedly just as taken by him. He showered her with gifts, including a luxury house in Wilton Crescent, Belgravia, and by the end of their short time together, he had spent over £250,000 on her. This is more than an astonishing £21 million today. Their affair was well known, as indicated by a brief article published in August of 1850 in a Bristol paper. The Nepalese ambassador leaves this country this week and takes with him a young English girl of surpassing beauty and evil spirit, a second Lola Montez whom she must equally encourage to trust herself alone among the Nepalese warriors and their wives. Her Majesty has been, it is said, much scandalized by the appearance of this young lady in the Nepalese ambassador's box at the opera, the said one being next to the one occupied by Her Majesty herself. The name of the person alluded to is Laura Bell. She is of a respectable Irish family, but has been living for some time in London a life of open and extravagant profligacy. Her carriages, one of the most stylish equipages there, might usually be seen at the ton hour in the park. Although horrified at the idea that the young prince had plundered the treasury of Nepal, the India office was forced to reimburse him for Laura's services. When he reluctantly returned home, he promised that he would always fulfill her every wish. As a result of the prince's generosity, Laura was suddenly a wealthy young woman, aged just 21. The prince also gave her a ring as a token of his undying love. Years later, after he had departed England, Laura, upon hearing of the plight of besieged British officers and their families at Lucknow, penned a letter to Jung. The ring he had once gifted her was also included in her missive. She had urged him to convince the Nepalese court to help the British. The court refused to act, but Jung was unable to refuse Laura, and he personally led his own troops to help the British break the siege. Even though the prince had made Laura very wealthy practically overnight, she was still very reluctant when it came to paying bills. An interesting article appeared in a newspaper in 1851 related to her finances. Miss Laura Bell, the courtesan of Dublin, whose name has been before the public on the 12th of September 1850, gave at London a bill of exchange for £195 for jewels purchased of Mr. Josh Joel. She came to Paris without paying the bill, and Joel passed it to a Frenchman. When it came due, Monsieur Rogneau, the holder, caused proceedings to be taken on it and had her arrested. Miss Bell, instead of being taken away at once to prison, caused herself to be conveyed to the residence of Monsieur Guy de la Tour du Pin, who advanced her 5,300 francs to pay the debt and costs, but under reserves. The lady was thereupon released, and yesterday she appealed to the Court of Appeal to have the judgment of the civil tribunal declaring the validity of the debt set aside. But after hearing arguments, the court confirmed the judgment.
Don't forget to visit Oddie's Global Emporium. All your desires fulfilled.
One might understand why so many males were willing to dash to her rescue by a description of her penned by a writer of the gossip pages. It was Laura Bell's aim to cut a dash, and this she certainly succeeded in doing. She had a small, doll-like face, piquant and provocative, big blue eyes, a strawberry and cream complexion, cascades of glorious golden hair, the most shapely pair of shoulders in London, and a soft and persuasive voice. She was, in short, well armed for her attack upon male susceptibility. Hyde Park she adopted as her showroom, wherein to display her charms. And in Hyde Park, when she went riding or driving, she invariably caused a sensation. She drove daily in the park with a tiger, a young page boy in a waistcoat of black and yellow stripes and a tall cockaded hat, sitting up proudly behind her. On the 21st of January 1852, Laura made a calculated leap and married an eccentric army captain named Augustus Frederick Thistlethwaite. His godfather was the Duke of Sussex. Thistlethwaite was exceedingly rich because of a massive inheritance. Laura was a spendthrift, of course, and happily ploughed her way through her husband's money. This resulted in the couple constantly arguing because she spent so much on her wardrobe. Augustus insisted she curb her spendthrift ways. Despite her husband tightening the purse strings, Laura continued to spend freely on items offered graciously by eager tradesmen. Initially, her husband unhappily paid these bills. When he would not pay, she sighed deeply, battered her long eyelashes, and relied on pecuniary assistance from a friend. As her spending continued with full vigour, her husband naturally became very upset. Augustus finally told tradesmen she should not be allowed any more credit. In 1878, an indignant milliner, Mr. Padwick, sued Augustus Thistlethwaite for bonnets and shawls and other feminine fripperies. The case went to trial and Thistlethwaite argued that other women in his wife's social position spent much less than she did. His attorney also stated, "Mrs. Thistlethwaite appears to have a passion for such wretched vanities, and it is most improper that her husband should be expected to meet the bills thus incurred." Jurors agreed with his arguments, absolved Thistlethwaite of responsibility, and noted that the credit was extended to his wife and not to him. Laura continued spending unabated. In 1881, an upholsterer on South Audley Street was trying to recover money for furniture repaired and new furniture ordered by her after she pledged the credit of her husband. The furniture maker knew nothing about the earlier case with the milliner, nor that Laura was given a set allowance. He also did not remember receiving a circular that stated she had no authority to order any goods on behalf of her husband. Thus, when the verdict came back, it did not go well for the furniture maker, and the jury went in favor of the defendant. Laura remained extremely popular in fashionable circles, and, in fact, her popularity was great enough that a carte de visite was made of her. CDVs were a type of small photograph patented in Paris by photographer André Adolphe Eugène Disdere in 1854. They were mounted and finished by hand at his atelier. Initially the cards were not very popular with the social butterflies. But in 1859, when Disdere published a CDV of Emperor Napoleon III, the cards became an overnight success. People everywhere were soon having their coiffured visages photographed and extending their CDVs with an exaggerated flourish. Laura's card was popular to trade with other collectors and was eagerly swapped for cards featuring such personalities as the Prince of Wales, Napoleon Bonaparte, the Duke of Wellington, and other famous persons of the time. One day Laura heard the revivalist Richard Weaver speak. This changed her life. He had been a hard drinker and prize fighter who had converted to Christianity. In 1856, Laura embraced her new religious beliefs and embarked on a career as a preacher, addressing audiences at venues such as the Regent Street Polytechnic. She hosted religious meetings and encouraged high society to help alleviate the lot of the common prostitute. She travelled the country delivering sermons and was said to be a superb speaker. Deciding that her West End luxury was not conducive to her new lifestyle, in 1887 Laura abandoned her mansion and relocated to Woodbine Cottage, just off Finchley Road in Hampstead. This building no longer exists, but the present Lincroft Gardens was constructed on the site. Laura continued to be irresistible to men and continued to have affairs, including one with the artist Edwin Landseer. He is probably best known for sculpting the lions at the base of Nelson's column. It was during this period that Laura also became friendly with Prime Minister William Gladstone. Gladstone and his wife stayed on occasion at her cottage in Hampstead, and Laura would often drive him to political meetings in her carriage. They remained close confidants throughout the rest of her life. When he made the decision to stand down as Premier in 1892, he confided in Laura even before informing Queen Victoria. Laura promised Gladstone she would write for him an account of her life. Her autobiography arrived at Downing Street in at least 28 parts between early September 1869 and mid-January 1870. Gladstone was undoubtedly excited by the installments. His letters of response show that Laura confided intimate details of a childhood running wild, followed by what appeared to be coerced sexual relationships with older men from the age of 14. Gladstone kept her letters and the autobiography until 1893, when he burned them. Another mention of their relationship came from Edward George Geoffrey Smith Stanley, 14th Earl of Derby. Strange story of Gladstone frequenting the company of a Mrs. Thistlethwaite, a kept woman in her youth, who induced a foolish person with a large fortune to marry her. She has since her marriage taken to religion and preaches or lectures. This, with her beauty, is the attraction to G, and it is characteristic of him to be indifferent to scandal. But I can scarcely believe the report that he is going to pass a week with her and her husband at their country house, she not being visited or received in society. On the 7th of August 1887, Augustus was found dead from a pistol shot at his home in Grosvenor Square. This gentleman had an eccentric habit of summoning his servants to his bedroom by firing a revolver into the ceiling. When investigated, this claim did appear to be true, with the visitor remarking on the bullet holes in the ceiling. The coroner decided that Augustus had stumbled against the table and accidentally shot himself. The cause of death being a pistol shot to the head accidentally while carrying a loaded pistol. He was found in a helpless condition on the floor and died in 14 hours. This was what was recorded on his death certificate. However, many believed it was suicide. In the end, Laura inherited everything, which was reported to be an estate valued at over £71,000. Laura now began referring to herself as God's ambassadress, and claimed that she was a sinner saved by grace through faith in the Lamb of God. The famous monthly American magazine Harper's reported on her conversion. Laura Bell, who was the heroine of the London Letters 4 or 5 years ago, who drove exquisite equipages and gave ravishing suppers, and fluttered for a tinsel hour, became converted, as read in a late London letter. And now, in an exquisite dress but with faded beauty and angular features, preaches to men and women with eager concern. She gets good society to her dinner parties and talks over human depravity with earls and marquises, and kisses pious countesses upon the cheek. Laura had settled down and became a respectable citizen, contributing generously to local charities and causes embracing animal welfare. Towards the end of her life, she was a totally changed character. In 1894, she fell ill and was in a coma for 4 days, finally passing away in Woodbine Cottage on the 30th of May. The cause of death was given as acute renal congestion and uremia. The obituary stressed her good works, making only veiled references to her past life. Laura was buried in her husband's family vault in Paddington Cemetery, Willesden Lane. She left £41,357 and instructions in her will for Woodbine Cottage to become a retreat for clergymen of all denominations. But the property was sold to a consortium for about £13,000, today's worth about £1.5 million, and it was demolished. Despite this avaricious avoidance of honouring her last wishes, Laura Bell had succeeded in becoming, without a doubt, one of the most extraordinary women of the Victorian era. Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Wow, how much money did that woman have? How much of it went through her hands? It's just, I'm finding it very hard to comprehend that amount of money. Incredible. Well, she loves spending. Why not? You only live once, as they say. But she's a classic example, Laura, of how a destiny can change dramatically. There she was, thinking that her life, that was it as a courtesan, having no idea of the person that she would become at the end. Totally changed. I love stories like that. I love it when someone comes from an impoverished background and just rises to those glittering heights. It's quite amazing. And then does another full turnaround at the end and becomes a completely different person. It's just amazing. It's like there was all these different characters hiding within her. Here's a few quotes from Shakespeare, not in their entirety, but I really think it applies to Laura's life and to all of our lives. It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. I love those quotes. It often makes me ponder when I read them. What about you? Has your life changed over the decades? Are you still the same person as you were when you were young? I know I'm not. There's little bits of me left over from when I was young, but I've totally changed. I'm most certainly not the same person I was, and my life has changed also dramatically. I'm pleased to say that it that it has improved. It wouldn't be good if it was the other way around. Yes, I don't miss those days at all. I do miss, and if you're of a certain age, you'll know exactly where I'm coming from, I do miss the energy that I had back then. The youthfulness that I had. I would literally bounce out of bed in the morning, jump on my push bike and cycle miles to work all day, cycle all the way back home, then go snorkeling, and then do another 4 laps around Centennial Park in Sydney. I was like super fit back then. That's no longer the case. I get out of bed in the morning, I sort of creak out of bed. I think some of you will know where I'm coming from there. So, I think I'm coming to the end of the blah blah. Methinks, a bit of Shakespeare creeping into me now, I'm playing another part. Methinks that this month it's time for another vintage crime interlude, probably in the middle of the month there. What say thee? I'm not exactly sure which one yet. I have got a few bookmarked. I may even sort of head in a later vintage. When I say that, I may even, sort of go up to sort of, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, they're still decades old. It's vintage enough. What do you think about that? Shall I do some older ones, not just the, early part of the 20th century? There are some that have sort of stuck in my mind from those previous decades I mentioned that I think are worth covering. Anyway, I'll think about that. I'm still not sure at the moment, but I'm rambling. I'm bloody well rambling, my dears. I'm definitely going to sign off now. Anyway, my dear friends, take care. I've probably forgotten something. No doubt there will be an addendum after this. But if there isn't an addendum, then I am saying goodbye. And God bless and take care until next time. I told you I'd be back, but I have good reason, because I have a brand new design out on my Zazzle merchandise site, and it is this design here, my time machine photo booth, vintage photo booth. And there I am sitting in there waiting for a passenger. Will you join me, my dear friends? Who knows where we'll end up? There's not much room inside and there's only one stool, so I guess we'll have to come to some sort of arrangement. I'm sure we'll work something out. It comes in a mug at the moment and a t-shirt, and here they are. I may include them on some other designs. Feel free to give me some suggestions on what other items I can place that design. I hope you like it. Tell me what you think about it. Yes, this is available on Zazzle now, and I will leave the link in the description. If I forget, just give me the heads up and I'll put it there. All right, bye-bye definitely this time.